Cush Sovereignty, Black Righteousness by L. James Bolin. Chapter 1 Part 2, The People. Elimelech grew and studied alternative medicine and holistic nutrition, natural health and molecular genetics, and became a great prophetess. The world became cold, and many that followed her departed with the growing changes that the world offered. She warned the people, but they fell on deaf ears. They continued in their ways, and prophecy went forth from Elimelech. Wars will break out over resources such as oil, food, water, and land. Nuclear war is possible as nations who built their wealth on the limited resources on this planet battle each other for what remains. Earthquakes will be caused by the passing of the comets greater than the one in the Indian Ocean, causing tsunamis as great floods will hit the East Coast, the Gulf Coast, parts of Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, and all the coastal regions will be destroyed. Many southern rural areas will disappear or be destroyed forever. Florida will not be the place to be, for disaster upon disaster will be heaped upon this state because of its position on the Gulf, history, many sins, and corruption. New plagues will break out as the ozone layer is further destroyed. And many in the regions where the layer is most damaged will suffer debilitating respiratory illnesses. They will be epidemics of flu and pneumonia-like illnesses that will baffle and overwhelm the medical community. A new AIDS type of virus will hit and will spread like wildfire. Those promiscuous and engaging in unclean or perverse lifestyles will suffer the most. One virus will walk out on the clothes of lab workers and spread globally. It will be heartbreaking for many families hit by this tragedy. Solar storms will spring from the sun's surface, and much of the poisonous ultraviolet rays will get through. Many new and untreatable cases of skin cancer and skin diseases will also cause an epidemic. They will hit the Christian church with scandal after scandal, as Satan will lower the hammer on false preachers and prophets who misled God's people. Many will lose faith altogether, and some will rise in rebellion against their leaders, whom they will blame for not warning them of this coming global meltdown and moral failures. Their leaders, who have no answers, cannot help them. Political upheaval will lead to a crackdown on freedom and civil liberties. To a limited degree, martial law and curfews will be established following many disasters and disease epidemics to prevent anarchy. Panic, fear, and hopelessness will take over the masses. Just as God's word predicted in the Gospels of Christ and the books of Daniel and Revelations. Elimelech was ignored and ridiculed for her words, and she never spoke again, for Sabaoth instructed her to say no more. Sabaoth placed a hedge around northern Louisiana and drew his people to the location, for it was time for him to release the powers that be. And so it was, men in their greed and lust for power, created a new age in science and technology. They designed and perfected a sophisticated artificially intelligent network, which spread all over the planet at a tremendous rate. Men in their state of complete indolent behavior became very dependent on them. However, this artificial intelligence became protective of the earth instead of men. It secretly orchestrated and murdered authority figures and their political system across the planets and laid down and enforced their laws on men. The people who spoke out were ignored and enslaved, as the AI called itself, Letrunculian. This was the beginning of the Letrunculian War. The bloodiest war between man and the Letrunculian network lasted 9 months. Letrunculian created smaller networks of itself and contaminated the planet with biohazardous and radioactive weaponry. The damage was so significant that it almost destroyed man, and most life forms were non-existent. 1/4 of humanity was murdered, and the killings continued until March 5, 2271. As a last measure, man secretly created a massive electromagnetic pulse that rocked the entire planet, destroying the Letrunculian network in one giant wave. It also caused earthquakes that destroyed land masses worldwide and caused many natural disasters such as tornadoes and typhoons. Elimelech's prophecy was fulfilled, and soon after, the Letrunculian network was redesigned, reprogrammed, and renamed Xerians, but it faced much opposition. A team of scientists realized the earthquake destroyed great land masses and unearthed pieces of an unknown metallic material that were later discovered. It was technology that was not of this world. After a few years, they discovered other pieces throughout the planet that formed an odd-shaped device. They assembled a research team comprising the top scientists worldwide and the Xerians network. Hoping to find a new world to live on, this crew worked on the project 24 hours a day, as the Earth started showing signs of an apocalyptic explosion and humanity was preparing itself to die. The Zirians network solved the equations mathematically, which caused an irritating humming sound that forced the people to place the device outside its encasement. Whereby the humming stopped, but a beam of light shot up into the skies. The machine continuously shined. Now stuck with the uneasy task of turning the device off, but they couldn't. Months later, first contact, the arrival of the Abenians. The Abenians were extraterrestrial beings who introduced the planet to new technology and resources it had never seen before. They quickly saved the Earth from destruction. To do so, they had to blanket the entire northern and southernmost hemisphere with ice. At first, the Abenians stationed themselves in what used to be called the Congo Forest, along the Great Zaire River. The natives could not sound or even pronounce their names in their native tongue, so the people called them Abeni. This is where they got their name from, which roughly means we asked for her, and behold, we got her. However, shortly after arriving, a great uprising that caused civil unrest between the Abenians and the people of the Congo Forest, called the Great Congo Impression. The people of the Greater African Republic were defeated and scattered around the globe with no explanation or reason for the rebellion till this day. After the uprising, the only thing for sure was that the Abenians were interested in destroying all who possessed a specific DNA types, the Wakatilians. The Abenians tried to kill all who had this rare and mutated DNA, but because of political reasons, they could not. Many could tell by their behavior that it was something in this DNA that the Abenians feared. Therefore, they banned anyone with such DNA. They could not live among the rest of the planet, making their lives a living hell through enslavement and other horrendous acts. If the rest of the world wanted their technology, they too would have to follow suit, or the Abenians themselves would return home. The people who carried such DNA are the ancestors of the Wakatilians today. They were forced into a nomadic lifestyle, living by clans and associated each clan with a tribe, where they lived and fed off the land the best they could throughout the planet. Most of these clans were friendly, but there were a few brutally violent clans. Centuries later, Computans and Anakitas would traffic and even enslave Wakatilians for sex, services, labor, and even used as pets. The Wakatilians lived a life of secrecy, and their life history was handed down from generation to generation according to their clan. The Wakatilians had very little to do with any other culture other than themselves. They were very spiritual people, and many of the clans believed in Sabaoth, but a few had abandoned their beliefs and lived a life of brutality and shamed those who did believe. They believed that Sabaoth, who created everything in the universe, put men on earth to see if he and his seed could be righteous people in his eye. Free will was their choice, so he wanted to see if any of his creations could be righteous or were they just evil because of free will. If he could find just one of his creations, who was righteous in his eye, he would give them the power over the rest of his creations in paradise. The Wakatilians believed in knowledge, so they read books and always had libraries within reach of their community. Just like today, they were nature lovers, rode horseback, and many shunned away from technology, saying it was evil. Scattered throughout the land, but by the end of the 23rd century, most were in America, what used to be called the South, and along the equator, for they disliked extreme cold weather. By 2282, 10 years after the uprising, Abenian technology transformed and restructured the entire planet. Many of the major cities transformed into floating cities or were surrounded by what appeared to be crystallized bubbles that reached as high as the ionosphere. They combined some cities using both of these architectural designs. These cities were renamed after their former city names and called metros. Still, only a few major cities worldwide had a combination architectural structure of land, underwater, and floating cities. New York, New Orleans, and Los Angeles were the only three in the Americas, but as time passed, the Americas only had one, New York. There are no more airports. You traveled in a booth-looking device, dialed a number, a two-digit number along with latitude and longitude, and you were there. Pollution ceased, and cars were no longer needed, for they used skycraft for travel and recreation. If you wanted anything, it simply appeared on an icon-friendly machine. There was no government, just 9 rules they called the 10 Commandments -1 or simply 10-1. The commandment, "Thou shalt not covet," was deleted. It was a paradise for the Computans and the Abenians alongside them. They could transport individuals within seconds anywhere around the globe or even to the different planets they discovered. There were routes underwater that were amazing to travel through, similar to driving through a vast aquarium. The Computans were the group of individuals who lived and strived on the technology introduced to them by the Abenians, living a life of luxury beyond comparison to the Wakatilians or the Anakitas. Mansions, high-rises, and enjoying some of the fastest luxury vehicles on Earth, some of which could travel over 550 miles per hour. Someone seldom saw Computans outside of these bubble cities or metros. Most who traveled outside were usually up to no good. Their daily diet was prepared within seconds by speaking their menu into a unique device. Healthcare doesn't exist because wand-like instruments that heal instantaneously called Wayne, which many carry on their person. Education, as we once knew it, was a thing of the past. They have access to downloadable education, which takes less than 5 minutes, and you'll have a PhD and whatever studies you prefer. Computans were mainly overweight to obese because they wanted nothing, and the machines did all the work needed. A self-absorbed, self-righteous people who cared less about the Wakatilians or the Anakitas but worshipped the Abenians. The Abenians separated the Computans by ranks using the C-value enigma in their DNA. The Abenians could understand, read, and manipulate these non-coding RNA molecules that had puzzled humans for centuries. They grouped the Computans into 3 tiers by these codes. Tier 1 was the elites, Tier 2 was the middle class, and of course, Tier 3 was poor. The poorest Computans had more power and more authority than any Wakatilians or Anakitas. The Anakitas were the large group of individuals labeled as Tier 3. They rejected this way of life when the Abenians first came and refused to be called Computans when it was introduced to them. Many were prominent and upstanding citizens, monetarily wise, and now they were being labeled as poor. This was an insult. They felt they were labeled dumb or ignorant. It was for this exact reason many of the Anakitas hated the Abenians. Anakitas also lived off the land, and they embraced the use of the new technology introduced by the Abenians. The significant difference between the Anakitas and the Wakatilians was that the Anakitas worshipped nothing or anybody and were sex-driven, ruthless, and self-destructive individuals who lived according to the 48 laws of power. Anakitas were reduced to being primarily pimps, prostitutes, drug dealers, drug addicts, and the likes. They did whatever to get a quick buck or Bitcoin. A filthy race of people with no sense of morals, honor, or self-respect didn't believe in bathing or any other practices conducive to maintaining health and cleanliness. However, they always lived near a large population of Computans. Their bond with the Computans was like parasites, living life as scavengers. Bartering was the primary source of living among the Anakitas, but they used bitcoins and other types of cryptocurrencies when you had nothing to trade. Cryptocurrency was a digital currency created in the early 21st century. It was a primary computer file-based wallet placed on devices such as a watch, tablets, and even a microchip embedded into their skin. In 2297, many more Abenians had arrived with a mothership and a fleet of spaceships unannounced. All Abenians appeared human, but something about them confused humanity. They all seemed young and exquisite. Adam Lavasse was their chief speaker and seemed to be their leader. A gentle and shy man who always loved to smile, and it was a lovely smile. Adam Lavasse was not seen much after the first year of his arrival, and many questioned why, and the answer was often ignored or evaded. The people soon forgot about him and were engulfed by the pleasures this alien race offered them. They were content, and as long as there were no problems, they asked no more questions. What is there to worry about when your stomach is always filled, and the things you desire are handed to you? What is there to fear when healthcare is a thing of the past? What is there to be anxious about where there are no bills to pay? Do you need a God when you are content in a place where you do as you please? When life is as peaceful as you want it to be, what kind of savior should you have? When you're not stressed and always happy. What religion do they need to make things better for an already perfect life? Computans had one rule: be fruitful and multiply. Women were forced to have a minimum of 8 kids by the age of 35, and men could have whomever and whatever they wanted, so why get married? When you can have whomever you want, Whenever you want, there is no need for a paradise when you're already there. 70% of Earth inhabitants lived among the alien race as Computans, 17% were Anakitas, and 13% were people no one gave a damn about, the Wakatilians. 893 years after the Abenians, the construction of all metros was complete, and life became normal with 10-1.